this is Patty Sliney, Handy Quilter National Educator here. And we had a really interesting question come up on one of the Facebook groups for Pro Stitcher. And the poster wanted to know if she could combine two designs and try to stitch them out as one design. She was doing a little custom quilting, sort of delving into the custom quilting arena. And I thought it would be fun to do a little video on some options about how to do that. And the designs she was using were actually two block designs. So based on where their start and end points land, there's really no way to connect them unless you were to bring them into Pro Stitcher Designer and do some magic in Pro Stitcher Designer to try to make them into one single design that would stitch out start to finish without any jumps. So, barring that, what's the next best option is a short jump that really isn't that big of a deal in the greater scheme of life. So, just wanted to kind of show you how to do that. So she had a hexagon block, and it was two designs, a hexagon outline and then sort of a star design. It's called Prisms, and it's in our Pro Stitcher built-in designs in the blocks folder. So let's go ahead and I'm going to try to recreate what she had. So first thing, let me open up the area. So we have an area, and we have a built-in hexagon area for those of you that have Pro Stitcher Premium and have at least version 537 or newer installed. We got an entire areas library, and you can find that simply by going to Area, File, Open, and then browse to the Areas folder, which you can see is above your Designs folder. Windows lists everything alphabetically, so it's going to live above in your file structure above the Designs folder. So I've selected that. You know it's selected because it's green. And also, if you look at my file path, here it is. I'm in the C areas folder, and it was the hexagon area. So I'm going to select that and click open. So now I've got my area, and this happens to be 6 by 6, as you can see here. And we're just going to leave it at that size. I don't know what size her blocks were, but let me move my crosshairs out of the way so you can see it. So, now she had an outline design in here. It was just a hexagon. So let's go ahead and find that. Believe it or not, we actually have one, and it's also 6 inches. So let me open that. So I'm going to File, Design, Open. So now I'm opening a design, and it is in the 1PS Designs Blocks subfolder, and cleverly, it's also named Hexagon. So let's scroll down to Hexagon, and there it is. Select it, click Open, and let's put it in the area so we can get it aligned to the area. So if I go to Modify, Align, and this is going to align the active design. And I know my hexagon is active because it's black. So if I click on Center, there we go. And we'll refresh, and that'll center it right in my area. Okay, so I'm going to make it a little bit smaller so it's still centered, but it's not going to stitch out right on top of the area. So that way on your quilt top, if you made your area right in the seam allowance of your hexagon block, our outline stitch is going to stitch, maybe 1/8 of an inch inside that to give it kind of an outline, which is the point of an outline design. So let's resize it. So if I go to Modify, I'm going to resize the width because that's just an easier number to work with, but I want the height to also resize proportionally. So I'll turn the lock button on, and let's make this a wee bit smaller. Instead of 6, we'll make it 5.8. Okay, so I like that. I've executed a modification, so my baseline tool came on. So let's baseline that modification. Alrighty, and let's turn our lock button off. You always want to turn your lock button off because it can affect you resizing an area down the road. If you were to resize this area, it would try to do that proportionally, and we don't want that to happen. So I know it's in the resize, modify resize right sidebar, but it affects your area resize as well. So turn it off. All right. Next, she wanted to use the prisms design. So if I go to File, Design, Open, you can see it's right there, but I want to show you where it is. It's in the One PS Designs blocks folder also. And ProStitcher reopened to this subfolder because that's where I had opened my previous design. So it always opens your previous file path. It just happens to be the correct file path, which is handy. And it's called Prisms. So let me open up Prisms for you. There we go. Okay, so she wanted to put this design in the middle. So that's easy enough, and you can see it's the active design because it's black, and you can see my hexagon. If I go to my workspace tab, you can see Prism is active, it's green, hexagon design is not active, and we know that because it's gray. So we're working with our active design. Again, let's center this. So we're going to go to Modify Align so we can center it in our area. Just click Center. And, baseline should be active, but it's not. This is an interesting little, I don't want to call it a bug, but maybe glitch in our software. If you have multiple designs on your workspace, and we have two, sometimes baseline will not be available, but there's a way we can kind of trick it into becoming available because I want to baseline that modification. I aligned this, so I executed a modification and I want to baseline that. Here's a way to kind of force baseline to be available when you need it. If you click your Select None button, so we're going to deselect everything, then select your Prisms design again. That usually makes baseline available as it did here. So now I can execute that align modification. All right, it's not the right size. We need to resize it to fit into this area. And I know that I made the width of my hexagon 5.8, so let's resize the prism using that aspect. We're going to turn our lock back on, and I'm going to resize the width to 5.8. That should stretch the points out to the edge of the hexagon. So let's do that. Enter. And it did, and it resized it proportionally, but notice the points of my vertical points don't touch, and I would really like them to touch. I'd like them to fill in this block a little better. No problem. We can resize the height. Let's turn off the lock because we don't want to resize the width. We just want to resize the height. But I don't know what to resize it to. So let's do this. Let me put my crosshairs and let me make this a wee bit bigger so we can see it. Okay, so I'm put my crosshairs right at the tippy top of my hexagon design. I'm going to turn on my measuring tape tool and I'm going to drag my crosshairs down, and I want you to watch the y-axis measurement because that's what we're measuring. We're measuring the y-axis, which is your vertical axis. A little trip back to your high school geometry class there. So let's move it down to the bottom tip. That's pretty close. 6.66 inches is what it's measuring. So I'm going to kind of round down to 6.6. So I'm going to turn my measuring tape off. That's another on-off tool, just like the lock button is. So let's now, I've still got my prism design selected. Let's do a resize height to 6.6. Turn. And you see I have my lock button off and it only resized the vertical aspect of this design. I like that. Well, baseline's available. That's great. I didn't have to trick it into being available. So let's baseline that modification. Let me move my crosshairs out of the way. That looks great. So now looking at our workspace, we have our hexagon design and we have our prism design. Everything is sized perfectly. Now, how can we combine these two designs so they'll be together and they will stitch out? They're not going to stitch out as one single design without a jump. And the reason being is here's our start stop for our hexagon design. And if I touch the prism design to make it active, you can see the start and end points are right in the center of the design. So in order to go from this stop point to this start point, it's going to have to jump. I'm okay with that. It's not that big of a deal. but I want these to be one design with the jump. So how do I do that? We're going to have to group these. Here's how you group. So the easy way, we could certainly just do a select all because they're in the correct order. I want my hexagon design to stitch out first. That will kind of stabilize the block. And then I want the prism design to stitch out second. So we could do something as simple as select all, and that's going to group it in the correct order. Or I can use my select none, deselect everything. See how everything is grayed out? Nothing is green here, so nothing is selected. Now I could use multi-select and select them in the order I want. I could select the hexagon first and then prisms. Now I've got a temporary group here. Turn your multi-select off. Don't forget to turn this off. You don't want to accidentally group stuff down the road you don't want grouped. Again, it's one of our on-off tools. Just like lock is in the modify resize right sidebar, it's also an on-off tool. So I've got my temporary group. I'm happy with it. It's going to jump. I'm good with that. So I'm going to baseline this and watch what happens to our group over here when I baseline. It's telling me I now have a permanent merged group, and I can save this design. Just do a file, save, selected, and I might want to save it. I have a little miscellaneous folder for fun stuff, so I'll stick it in here. And I don't want to call it merged group. Let's clear that. I might want to call it just my hexagon block or hexagon prism block. And I would save it. Okay. Now, when you go to your machine, you have some choices here. I prefer to not have my machine jump automatically. I don't like that. I want my machine to stop when it gets to a start stop point so I can pull up my bobbin thread trim and then touch resume, and then it will move to the next start point and stitch it out. So here's how you do that. You're going to go to your settings tab and you're going to go to your auto jump and you're going to type 0 in here. That tells ProStitcher when you have your auto jump set to 0, that says, ProStitcher, please pause at all the endpoints so I can pull up my bobbin thread, trim it, and then touch resume, and then it will move to the next start point and stitch out the next. And so that's exactly what's going to happen here. So if I click run, verify my settings, I've got my tie-offs on, I've got the right tie-off numbers, the right distance. I've set it to micro, which is my preference. I have both pull-up and pull-up auto on. So if you don't know what pull-up auto is, let's cancel that and I'll show you. Pull-up auto is in settings, pull-ups. Pull-up on should always be on. 100% of the time, there's no scenario where you'd ever want that button off. And then pull up auto is when you've done the pull up, and if you have pull up auto on, your machine will move about 2 inches to the right. That allows you, kind of moves the needle away and allows you to reach your bobbin, pull up your bobbin thread and hold it so you can do your tie off safely. I like that feature. It's optional. You can always manually move the machine over a little bit to reach your bobbin thread and pull it up, but I think it's a nice tool, so I like to use it. So I have that on. So let's go back to ProStitcher Quilt and let's run this. I'm going to move my crosshairs just like you would do. You're going to move your machine needle close to, but not on the start point. ProStitcher likes to have a little bit of a running start when it goes to do your first stitch for your pull-up. The reason being is there's some coding that gets executed when you hit the run button. There's a coding string that executes before you get to the pull-up, and that's an important coding string. It tells ProStitcher a bunch of stuff. It says, hey, there's a pull-up, there's pull-up auto, we got some tie-offs, and then you're going to stitch. So it's that coding string that you need to give it enough time. Just a couple seconds is all it needs, but it needs that couple of seconds to execute that coding string. If you have your needle right on top of your start point, it doesn't have that time sometimes to execute that coding string. And so sometimes what will happen is you'll get your pull up and tie offs done, and then when it goes to stitch, it just starts air stitching. So if you've ever had that happen, that could be the cause. So running start, click run, check my settings, they're good, and I'm going to proceed. And then it's going to do my pull up auto. There's pull up auto. See how it moved my machine needle away? Pull up my bobbin thread and hold it. Click resume. Now it's going to do my tie offs. Bloop, bloop, bloop. And you can see it's going up to do the hexagon design first. And then it's going to pause delay here so I can trim my threads, trim my bobbin threads, click resume, and then it's going to stitch out my hexagon design first, which is what you want to stabilize your block. And then it's going to do the tie-offs. And then it's going to pause here to let me trim my threads. It's not going to do this automatic long jump, which I don't want a big long stretch jump stitch. I don't like those. It's just my personal preference. So I've trimmed my bobbin threads. I'm going to clear my pop-up menu and then I'm going to resume. And so now the needle is going to move to the next start point and stitch out my prism design. There you saw pull up auto happen again. Pull up my bobbin threads, click resume. It's going to do the tie offs again. And I'm holding my bobbin threads. And it'll give me a pause delay, trim my bobbin threads, click resume, and away it goes and it stitches out the middle design. So I hope that's helpful. This is how you would combine two designs and allow yourself to have a little jump. Set your jumps to 0 in settings, auto jump, so you can trim your threads. And here's the way that you can combine two designs into one with just a little jump stitch. So hope that was helpful, and happy quilting. If you have any questions, just tag me on one of the Facebook social media groups. I'm happy to answer your questions.